She called me a failure. In front of everyone. But what happened exactly 72 hours later will shock you. Get ready for the plot twist that no one saw coming. You won't believe what my own mother begged for. Have you ever felt underestimated? Devalued by your own family? Unfortunately, 85% of people have faced some kind of destructive criticism from loved ones. I was one of them. But I transformed humiliation into power. In this video, you'll discover how. First, I turned pain into my greatest motivation. Second, I built an empire from zero, against all expectations. Third, I forced those who doubted me to bow. Stay until the end, because my redemption story is proof that success is the best revenge. If you've ever felt this way, leave an "I understand you" in the comments right now. It was a cold winter night, but the warmth of the fireplace in my parents' house could barely heat the icy atmosphere that always settled whenever the family gathered. My name is Sophia, and at 28, I still felt the weight of my parents' unmet expectations, especially from my mother, Helena. She was a businesswoman, ruthless and successful, an imposing figure who commanded the dinner table with the same authority she commanded her multimillion-dollar company. Helena expected nothing less than perfection from her children, and Carolina, my older sister, had always been the embodiment of that perfection. She was the prodigy daughter, the one who followed in mom's footsteps, the one who collected degrees and prestigious positions. I, on the other hand, had always been the black sheep, the dreamer, the one who preferred art to financial statements, who saw the world in colors and shapes while they saw it in numbers and profits. That night, the annual Thanksgiving dinner was in full swing, and the tension was palpable. The aroma of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie hung in the air, but couldn't mask the suffocating atmosphere of judgment. Carolina, with a victorious smile, displayed her new position as vice president at a major corporation, detailing her expansion plans and the millions she expected to generate. My parents' eyes sparkled with pride. When it was my turn to talk about what I was doing, I tried, in vain, to explain my online art gallery project. I spoke about passion, curating independent artists, democratizing art. The silence that followed my speech was deafening, broken only by the clinking of silver cutlery against fine porcelain. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence of disapproval and disappointment. Helena, with her penetrating gaze, set down her cutlery with a sharp click and stared at me. Her eyes, once so full of pride for Carolina, were now cold and distant. "Sophia," she began, her voice cutting like ice, each word a sharp blade, "when are you going to stop playing artist and do something useful with your life?" The words echoed through the room, and I felt all eyes on me, the curious looks of uncles and cousins, Carolina's condescending stares. My father, always passive, just lowered his head, unable to defend me or confront Helena. "You are a failure, Sophia," my mother continued, without beating around the bush, her voice rising in volume and intensity. "A complete and absolute failure. You have no ambition, no future. You're a shame to this family." Each word was a stab, and I felt my eyes well up, my throat tighten. The food on my plate seemed like lead, and the air became thin, as if all the oxygen had been sucked from the room. I wanted to scream, wanted to defend myself, wanted to tell them how wrong they were, how important art was, how dedicated I was. But the words just wouldn't come, stuck in my throat. The humiliation was so deep it seemed to suffocate me, crush me. I got up from the table, without saying a word, the chair scraping against the floor with a shrill sound that seemed amplified in the tense silence. I left the house, leaving behind the untouched banquet and the family that judged me, that saw me as a mistake. The cold night embraced me, and tears finally rolled down my face, hot and bitter. I was broken, but something inside me, a small flame of rebellion, ignited. I wouldn't be a failure. I would prove it to them. And I would prove it very soon, in a way they would never expect. The days that followed dinner were a blur of pain, anger, and iron determination. The humiliation I suffered at the Thanksgiving table didn't consume me as they expected. Instead, it lit a flame within me, a silent fury that drove me forward. I could no longer accept being seen as a failure, a disappointment. The small online art gallery I was building, which before was just a hobby, a refuge for my creative soul, now became my mission, my battlefield. I spent hours working, sleepless nights, with strong coffee as my only companion. I researched emerging artists, curated collections with a meticulous eye, optimized every pixel of the website, transforming it into a vibrant portal for art. Every sale, every customer compliment, every message from a grateful artist was a small step toward my redemption, a brick in building my empire. But my mother's voice echoed in my mind, a cruel mantra: "You are a failure." I needed something more, something grand, something that would prove once and for all that she was wrong, that I was capable of much more than she could ever imagine. That's when the opportunity arose, like lightning in a blue sky. A digital art contest, with a substantial cash prize and, more importantly, international recognition. The theme was overcoming. It was perfect, almost poetic. I dove headfirst into the project, transforming my pain, my frustration, and my anger into creative fuel. I worked day and night, with the computer screen as my only window to the world. My piece was an abstract representation of a phoenix rising from the ashes, with vibrant colors that exploded in shades of red and orange, and strong strokes that expressed the strength of resilience. It was my story, my silent revenge, painted in pixels. While I worked, I received messages from Carolina, full of sarcasm and unsolicited advice about how I should get a real job, as if art was just a passing phase, a child's whim. My parents, in turn, maintained a sepulchral silence, a silence that was even more painful than their criticism, because it meant they had given up on me. They didn't believe in me. Nobody believed. But I didn't need their belief. I needed my own. The contest deadline was approaching, and the pressure was immense, a knot tightening in my stomach. I was exhausted, physically and mentally, but the image of my mother's face, full of contempt, gave me strength to continue. I couldn't fail. Not now. Not after everything. I was determined to prove my worth, not to them but to myself. And the world would see. 3 days after that fateful dinner, the phone rang, breaking the heavy silence of my apartment. It was my father. My heart raced, an anxious drumbeat against my ribs. I expected another reprimand, another condescending sermon about my life choices, about the instability of my artistic career. But his voice was different, hesitant, almost fragile. "Sophia," he said, and the word came out like a whisper, "your mother. She's going through a very difficult time." I heard a heavy sigh from the other end of the line, a sound of contained despair. "Her company is on the verge of bankruptcy." I was in shock. Helena, the ruthless businesswoman, the unshakable rock of our family, the embodiment of success and strength, was crumbling? The news caught me completely by surprise, a bucket of cold water in the midst of my fury. Despite all the humiliation, all the cruel words, I didn't wish ill on my parents. There was a part of me, buried under layers of hurt, that still loved them, that still longed for their approval, for a minimum of recognition. My father continued, his voice choked with emotion. "She lost a millionaire contract, Sophia. The one that sustained most of our investments, the pillar of the company. She's desperate. Begging for help." A stab of perverse satisfaction hit me, a flash of bittersweet triumph. Revenge, I realized, wasn't as sweet as I imagined when I saw it come to fruition. It was complex, full of nuances. He asked me to go to their house, so Helena could speak to me personally. I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to relive the humiliation, face the look of contempt I knew so well. But curiosity, and perhaps a remnant of hope for a reconciliation, for a sincere apology, propelled me forward. I needed to see with my own eyes. I needed to understand the dimension of the disaster that had befallen them. And, more importantly, I needed to know what she, the woman who called me a failure, wanted from me. The irony of the situation was almost palpable, a script worthy of a movie, and I was about to discover the next act. I arrived at my parents' house with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, a strange feeling of déjà vu. The atmosphere was heavy, different from the usual luxury and ostentation that always permeated my parents' residence. The house, once vibrant and full of life, now seemed like a mausoleum, a reflection of its inhabitants' state of mind. Helena was sitting in the living room, not in her usual erect and confident posture, which exuded power and control, but hunched over, with curved shoulders, the image of defeat. Her eyes, once so full of judgment and criticism, now carried a gleam of desperation, a vulnerability I had never witnessed. My father was beside her, with his hand on her shoulder, a gesture of support I rarely saw, a sign that the situation was really serious. I sat in front of them, on the leather sofa that once seemed so imposing, and silence stretched for a long moment, filled only by the sound of my own heart beating strong, a rhythm accelerated by anxiety and expectation. Finally, Helena raised her head, her eyes meeting mine. "Sophia," she began, her voice almost a whisper, hoarse and choked with emotion, "I need your help." The words hit me like a shock, lightning in a blue sky. My mother, the woman who called me a failure, who humiliated me publicly, was begging for help. She explained the situation in detail, the loss of the millionaire contract that was the backbone of her business, the debts that accumulated like an avalanche, the imminent threat of losing everything they had built over decades. She looked me in the eyes, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability, not just in her words, but in every fiber of her being. "I know I was hard on you," she said, and her voice trembled. "I know I hurt you deeply. But I was wrong, Sophia. I was so focused on material success, on the relentless pursuit of more money and power, that I didn't see your own value, your essence. I didn't see your passion, your creativity, your ability to transform the world with your art. I was blind, selfish, and cruel." Tears flowed freely down her face, carving trails in her impeccable makeup, and my father looked at me with a look of pleas, a silent request for help. "We need you, Sophia. We need your help to save the company, to save our legacy. We need your money." The irony of the situation was almost unbearable, a script worthy of a dramatic comedy film. The failed daughter, the black sheep of the family, was the only hope, the last card. I took a deep breath, the knot in my throat tightening, the weight of the decision falling on my shoulders. Revenge was within my reach, a cold dish served with refinement, but at what cost? I could let them sink, watch from the sidelines the fall of their empire, or I could extend my hand, risking being hurt again. The decision was mine, and its weight was immense, a burden I never imagined carrying. The silence in the room was deafening, filled only by the echo of my mother's words, "We need your money." The proposal was a masterstroke of fate, a plot twist that not even I, with my fertile imagination, could have predicted. The woman who had labeled me a failure, who had mocked my artistic aspirations, who had publicly humiliated me, was now there, figuratively on her knees, begging for my financial help. The temptation to refuse, to let them taste their own poison, to watch the fall of their empire, was almost irresistible. I could simply get up, leave that house and never look back. Revenge would be complete, sweet and definitive, a personal triumph I had dreamed of for so long. But as I watched my mother's desolate face, tears flowing freely, and my father's look of pleas, a different emotion began to emerge. It wasn't pity, nor compassion, but something more complex, something that transcended hurt and anger. It was the realization that, despite everything, they were still my family. And somehow, I still loved them, a love that had been buried under layers of resentment. I took a deep breath, the air heavy with tension, the smell of despair hanging in the air. "I'll help you," I said, and my voice came out firmer than I expected, stronger than I felt. The relief on their faces was palpable, almost painful to see, as if an immense weight had been lifted from their shoulders. "But with one condition." Helena looked at me, eyes wide with hope, ready to accept any terms. "You will never doubt my value again. You will never call me a failure again. And you will support my art for real, not just with empty words, but with concrete actions." My mother nodded, tears flowing freely now, but this time they were tears of relief and perhaps regret. "Anything, Sophia. Anything." My father, for the first time in years, hugged me. It was an awkward embrace, a little stiff at first, but sincere, an embrace that conveyed a silent apology. At that moment, I realized that true revenge was not destruction, but reconstruction. It wasn't humiliation, but redemption. I wasn't just saving their company, I was saving our family, rebuilding the bonds that had been broken. And, more importantly, I was saving myself. I was proving to myself that I was more than a label, more than other people's expectations. I was Sophia, the artist, the daughter, the savior. And I was just beginning to write my own destiny, a destiny where art and family intertwined in a tapestry of triumph and overcoming. The game had changed, and I was the new queen. The silence in the room was deafening, filled only by the echo of my mother's words, "We need your money." The proposal was a masterstroke of fate, a plot twist that not even I, with my fertile imagination, could have predicted. The woman who had labeled me a failure, who had mocked my artistic aspirations, who had publicly humiliated me, was now there, figuratively on her knees, begging for my financial help. The temptation to refuse, to let them taste their own poison, to watch the fall of their empire, was almost irresistible. I could simply get up, leave that house and never look back. Revenge would be complete, sweet and definitive, a personal triumph I had dreamed of for so long. But as I watched my mother's desolate face, tears flowing freely, and my father's look of plea, a different emotion began to emerge. It wasn't pity, nor compassion, but something more complex, something that transcended hurt and anger. It was the realization that, despite everything, they were still my family. And somehow, I still loved them, a love that had been buried under layers of resentment. I took a deep breath, the air heavy with tension, the smell of despair hanging in the air. "I'll help you," I said, and my voice came out firmer than I expected, stronger than I felt. The relief on their faces was palpable, almost painful to see, as if an immense weight had been lifted from their shoulders. But with one condition. Helena looked at me, eyes wide with hope, ready to accept any terms. "You will never doubt my value again. You will never call me a failure again. And you will support my art for real, not just with empty words, but with concrete actions." My mother nodded, tears flowing freely now, but this time they were tears of relief and perhaps regret. "Anything, Sophia. Anything." My father, for the first time in years, hugged me. It was an awkward embrace, a little stiff at first, but sincere, an embrace that conveyed a silent apology. At that moment, I realized that true revenge was not destruction, but reconstruction. It wasn't humiliation, but redemption. I wasn't just saving their company, I was saving our family, rebuilding the bonds that had been broken. And, more importantly, I was saving myself. I was proving to myself that I was more than a label, more than other people's expectations. I was Sophia, the artist, the daughter, the savior. And I was just beginning to write my own destiny, a destiny where art and family intertwined in a tapestry of triumph and overcoming. The game had changed, and I was the new queen. And so, the daughter who was called a failure became the savior of the family. My story is proof that the greatest revenge is your own success, and that true strength lies in transforming pain into art, into purpose. If you identified with my journey, remember, your value is not defined by others' opinions. Transform adversity into your greatest motivation. Forgiveness can be your greatest victory. You just witnessed a story that defies logic, that proves that the impossible is just an opinion. But this story only becomes complete with your participation. If you felt a chill, if a tear rolled, if hope lit up in your heart, then you know what to do. Don't let this emotion die here. Click the like button now and show the algorithm that overcoming stories deserve to be seen. Leave your comment with the hashtag #IUnderstandYou and share your own comeback story. Your voice matters, and thousands of people need to hear what you have to say. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to not miss any of the upcoming plot twists that will blow your mind. And last but not least, share this video in every group, on every social network, with every person you know who needs a push to believe in themselves. Do it now, before the opportunity to inspire someone passes by. This is your last chance to be part of something gigantic. Millions of people have already been impacted. Be the next one. This channel is your source of inspiration to dominate your life. I shared my pain and my triumph. Now, give back with your action. Think about the impact this will have on your life and others' lives. Don't stay out of the community that is changing the game. And for those who stayed until the end, a secret. In the next video, I'll reveal how my sister, the perfect daughter, reacted when she saw our parents' company being saved by me. Her reaction was something not even Hollywood could invent. Get ready for the biggest family explosion you've ever seen. Don't miss it for anything. Join our community of success rebels and show the world your true value. The future starts now.